Dearest humans, welcome to our 231st online gathering for faith leaders across the country, now called Creating Beloved Community. This regular gathering is sponsored by ELCA's coaching ministry. I'm Jason O'Neill. I use any and all pronouns, and I'm honored to be one of your facilitators today.
And as you know, I'm Reverend Solveig Nilsson Gooden, and I use she, her pronouns. And I'm also your facilitator. I'm very humbly and happily doing so. In attunement with the truth and healing movement of the ELCA and the moving toward right relations with our Indigenous siblings and neighbors, we'll begin with the land acknowledgement. We are gathered together from all parts of Turtle Island, also referred to as North America. We're connected by the breath given us by the breath maker, and by the very piece of Mother Earth, the land that each of us inhabits today. We understand that all land is Indigenous land, and we invite each of you to name in the chat the Indigenous peoples or tribal nations whose lands you occupy now. We acknowledge the terror of colonialism, genocide, ethnic cleansing, broken treaties, stolen land, forced removal, and boarding schools, as well as the thousands of missing and murdered Indigenous women and children each year, and the ripple effects of violence still being experienced today. We know that Indigenous peoples are not historical subjects, but are part of our communities. They offer invaluable wisdom for how we exist in relationship with Mother Earth, as well as our human and non-human neighbors. And it's become our practice to also offer a labor acknowledgement, with permission granted by Dr. Tara Stewart. We acknowledge that much of what we know of this country today, including its culture, economic growth, and development, has been made possible by the labor of enslaved Africans and their ascendants who suffered the horror of transatlantic trafficking, slavery, and Jim Crow laws. We are indebted to their labor and their sacrifice, and we acknowledge the tremors of that violence throughout the generations and the resulting impact that can still be felt and witnessed today. So as you know, actually, I was just going to say you can update to include your pronouns, but we have done that, so we don't even need to say that. And you can access captions. I think you all know that too. So let's continue our work toward healing and justice by entering into a place of peace and listening together. I invite you to just take a deep breath together. Breathing connects and grounds us. Through these regular gatherings, we've developed a covenant of how we enter and interact in this space. We're committed to creating a safer and a braver space where each of us are able to bring the truth of who we are and how we're doing. If you shared something today that you wish for us to edit out of the recording, we are being recorded right now, let us know afterwards. And with all this said, we affirm these conversations are meant to be an intentional step to live more fully into God's dream for us as the body of Christ, the beloved community. As Bell Hooks wrote in All About Love, rarely, if ever, are any of us healed in isolation. Healing is an act of communion. And so in this act, we today and every second Wednesday are journeying through Custer Died for Your Sins, an Indian manifesto by Vine Gloria Jr. The reminder about our journey together is that we're all learning from this Indigenous elder through his writing. So we're not teaching, we're facilitated to this space each month. And so we begin again with a quote from this book, just to remind us of the import of what we're doing. But the Indian task of keeping an informed public available to assist the tribes in their efforts to survive is never ending. And so the central message of this book, that Indians are alive, have certain dreams of their own, and are being overrun by the ignorance and the mistaken, misdirected efforts of those who would help them can never be repeated too often. And so just a brief reminder of our covenant. We're just, the invitation is to share from our heads and our hearts. Practicing awareness of space and time. With only 4 of us here, it seems like we got a lot of space and time. So don't worry about that too much. Stepping forward and stepping back. But we are always learning. So it's really, really good to enter into this space and time in a vulnerable way, willing to say the awkward, not quite formulated thoughts and feelings. It's okay. That's part of the learning process. And this is a safe and brave space to do that because we're creating it that way. So I think we are at the point of remembering to greet you all from Jill. She would like to be here. She's here every month, but she's not able to be here with us today. And so she wanted to make sure that we greeted everybody from her. And now we're at the time where we get to take our 5 minutes, give or take, and start putting in the chat the quotes from the chapter that really stood out for us. And so just encourage you to go back to your chapter, put them in, put the page numbers, and put in as many as you are so moved to add today, so that we've got lots of good stuff for our. There are no shortage of quotes in any of these chapters, right?
Welcome, Mukesh. We're just taking a few minutes to put our favorite, I don't know if that's the right word, maybe meaningful quotes in the chat. Welcome, John Otto. We're just taking a few minutes to note from the book, chapter 6, which quotes shined for us.
Wait, just another 30 seconds or so. Okay. We did this last time where we just had everyone read their own quotes and so that we can hear each other's voices. So well, let's just start that way. And I think I have the first couple of quotes, so I'll start and then I see Tammy's next. Do other people see that? Are we in the right order? Okay, great. Page 135, but the attitude of local bureau personnel, Western Washington people told me, was to compromise Indian rights as much as possible. And page 135, also, one of the favorite games of the congressional committees has been to threaten termination every time the Bureau requests anything. Oh, Tammy, you're on mute.
From page 144, much of the problem was caused by the agitation of the churches for franchises to hunt souls on the reservations. This demand created the feeling the Indians were to be pawns in the great experiment of civilizing a savage people.
And 136, recommendation for termination is no idle threat. No Indian is so foolish as to believe that it can't happen again. So the tribe generally gives in and follows the Bureau line. The risk of total destruction of the Indian community is too great to treat lightly.
on page 136, as long as the Bureau is expected to prepare tribes for termination, it will fail in its programs.
I'll let you go, Sylvia. That was an error. I'm not sure how I continually did that, but that was me.
All fair, all fair. Deploring the lack of modern conveniences on the reservations is like, oh, that's beating, is like beating your old horse for not being able to fly. If the tribes or the Bureau could have developed the reservations any sooner, they would have done so.
And on 134, so a number of Indian students were denied an opportunity to get a better education because the local Bureau employees wanted to make a respectable record for themselves.
This next quote of mine was the same as one that you read earlier, Tammy, about the problem being caused by the churches. So we can go ahead with yours, Sunny.
In recent years, discussion has been ongoing. Whoops, is that mine? Yeah. Ongoing in Indian affairs, advocating giving the Indians more responsibility. This is useless talk, designed to cover up a multitude of sins, particularly does it cover up the basic responsibility of the federal government toward the Indian people? More or less, or no responsibility is irrelevant to the problem. When we talk about responsibility in these terms, we are talking about play acting. Responsibility can never be given unless it is welcomed and desired. I could no more give my children responsibility than I could give them the far side of the moon. They must have a real status and stake in the process, or they will recognize my overtures as tricks.
And on page 125, it would be fair to say that Indians are ambivalent about all of this.
From the bottom of page 143 and going into 144, people continue to talk about giving the tribes more responsibility, but they could not define for themselves what that responsibility should be, where it should be exercised, and what limits would be placed on it. If responsibility is irrelevant, sovereignty is not. States have sovereignty, counties have sovereignty, cities and towns have sovereignty, water districts have sovereignty, school boards have sovereignty. Why shouldn't tribes have total sovereignty? Originally, they did. Treaties recognized this basic fact of legal existence. Tribes agreed to go to the reservations, provided they could have their basic community rights of self-government.
Lots here. So would anyone like to speak more deeply about why you chose the quote that you did, or what feelings are arising for you as you read and as we read these excerpts today?
For me, the continuation from last chapter about Christian missionaries was a component of why I selected the quote that I did, or the first quote that I did, and just once again recognizing, at least being aware, growing awareness of our attempt as church to be what we thought to be right, or at the time, and how unjust and inappropriate we were, for the sake out of the sake of greed again. And how slow we are to respond to that even now. I mean, I guess that's the other component in this process. There are a few congregations who have, in certain states, have recognized this and returned some of the land to the tribe, but and now all the damage that has been done, and what are we doing about that?
You know what you just said, Tim? You just, you know, it's overwhelming. I mean, we've all had, I'm sure, that feeling of just overwhelm, like the damage, the centuries, the accumulation, and it just struck me as resonant with addiction and recovery and the 12-step process. Because when you are in the throes of addiction, you literally cannot, it's absolutely unfathomable to imagine how you can repair, how you can come out of it, how you can, I mean, it's unfathomable. And yet there's the first step is admitting that you're powerless over it. But that's followed by the second and the third step, which is acknowledging that there is a greater power that can lead us to sanity. And then there's a lot of work after that. There's a lot of, I mean, the whole work is after that, really. And yet that there's that power supporting us.
But you have to be wanting to do that. You want to take that step, and that in and of itself, I guess I'm thinking about my grandchildren and thinking about how they are struggling to take that step, to even begin that journey. But how much we as white people, we as church people, have influenced their situation.
Yeah, it's real. What about you, Sunny?
I was just thinking about, the whole idea of problem solving. And when we're trying to be creative and think outside of the box and find ways to do new things, and yet we always have to be honest and acknowledge what that past is. So it's like, just the thinking, that quote that I pulled out there about responsibility. I mean, I just think this whole issue, the whole book has been centered on that belief that the Indian people cannot be responsible, that they're not able to do things, that they couldn't make their own choices, that they would make poor choices. All of that assumption, which we see the same as we look at so many concerns we're trying to address, the wrongs we're trying to address in lots and lots of ways. So it's like, how do you begin again? I guess is what I found myself wanting to say. How do you begin again when there is not trust and there's no reason for there to be trust? And how do you begin again and say this time will be different when even just I highlighted all the agencies that were listed, and it was just like, oh my gosh, talk about if I wanted to work, if I wanted this, who do I talk to? Talk to this group, and then you got to talk to this group, and then this group, and this group. And we all know that doesn't work. I mean, isn't that how we watch church work? You can't do this until this committee says yes, and then this person has to, and then by then it's like, why even bother? But I just kept finding myself saying, there's got to be a way out of this box that has been created by generations of wrongs. But you can't just erase the past.
All right, here's me leaning into the learning piece, and I don't know how this is going to come out. So,
Go for it.
Grace abounds, buckets of grace.
buckets of grace. I just throw them on my head. I think I'm just astounded by I mean, I can barely fathom sometimes the decades I've been alive. And we're talking centuries. Like, so I can't grasp the time frame of this. That, okay, even this book was written, I think, in the 60s. So we're talking 80 years. Is that right? No, 60 years. Math is hard. But 60 years, so longer than I've been alive. It hasn't changed or changed minimally in that time, possibly even gotten worse in so many ways. Um, and then thinking back to like, okay, when this was centuries ago, like it's just a lot more of the same. I don't know what I want to say with that. I don't know. It still kind of astounds me of like Sunny mentioned about trust. Like, okay, if I had centuries, right, of storytelling from my people, yeah, this is what happens. Um, yeah, I wouldn't even want to be in relationship with white people or anybody else occupying my land. Or and I know it's not just white people, but I mean, yeah, I represent that color. So, um, yeah, I don't know. There's a lot there. And
What
maybe,
else?
oh, what'd you say?
I was gonna say, you just said there's a lot there, and my question was just, well, okay, well, what else is in there?
Oh, well, the other part I just had was like, and that's through my white lenses, right? I mean, like I'm saying all this through the lenses I was raised in, but trying to learn and yeah, do better. So it's not just we're doing this beautiful book study and then we end it and nothing changes.
But awareness is the first step. And I applaud us for for the ELCA coaching ministry for inviting us to learn together, because I think without this brave space to digest all of this, how many of you would be continuing to read this? You probably would have put it down after the first chapter, or maybe I'll speak for myself. I probably would have put it down after the first chapter. I'm not even sure I would have picked it up, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, that's true.
Or, picked it up and looked at it like, oh, this is cute, this is pretty, you can't see it, like, but like I'll set it back on the bookshelf or back in the library and maybe
I'm
think
pretty
that,
sure that I have done that when I've been in Sioux Falls and gone to some of the bookstores that have Indigenous art and resources and so forth. I'm pretty sure that I did look at it and kind of go, okay.
I'm curious how we like honor I don't know, the need for the buckets of grace and that like, okay, we can swim in them even. And right, like what are the action steps? What are the I mean, I know the biggest part is relationship. It's not about doing so much as like being with and living with and regular relationship with. And I have that minimally. Like I have a few Indigenous people that I'm in regular contact with, and I mean that's nowhere near enough.
when you said relationship with Jason, where I went, because yeah, it's a whole thing to have and cultivate and develop relationships with anyone from a different cultural background, for sure. Like that's like no small thing. There's a lot of tons of factors, right, that go into that. Also, people are people, and like sometimes relationships just don't work with people, like wherever they're from, right? You know. But when you said to be in relationship, what I heard was to be in relationship with this learning and teaching, and we can be in relationship with this for the rest of our lives. We can be in deep relationship with this ongoing learning, and I well, and I actually I see this in my own journey, that it's kind of a combination of being willing to learn on my own if there's nobody else around, in a group if there is, thank goodness, you know, being willing to take a risk in terms of relationships and kind of hang in there and not recoil the first mistake and stupid thing I say, you know, or recoil but then come back, you know. And then I just, I don't know. I mean, if God is expansive and in everyone and everything, then like the Spirit is moving us in, like is supportive of this movement in these relationships. And so there's also that element, I think, of mystery and trust, that if we like say and demonstrate, yeah, I'm willing and wanting to move in this direction, to open up, to be part of a reparative healing stream that will never be complete in, I was going to say 1,000 lifetimes, maybe less than 1,000 lifetimes, you know. But the Spirit will open up possibilities. And I'll just give one example, and that is that both Jason and I have been willing in our own lives to grow and learn in this particular way around Indigenous sovereignty and reality. And then we met through grief coach training. Well, who did that? Right? You know, and then it was like this way, and now here we are, like facilitate, like who, right? How did that happen? How did that happen?
Coaching ministry.
Well, yes.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
No, that's part of it also. That's
Yeah.
right. That's part of it's these the mysterious threads of the Spirit that get woven. And so there's part of, I think that's part of the buckets of grace. It's like our prayer is just to stay willing to be of use in this way and to keep learning, and that we will get used in some way that we maybe can't fathom right now. And maybe it's not tomorrow. Maybe it's a year from now. I don't know.
But I need it to be tomorrow.
That is our white approach.
White upon white.
So thank you for allowing me to be part of this space. As it is a wonderful space to continue learning and grow in your learning. So thank you for providing a space. So a few things. One, I would encourage us all not to be hard on ourselves, because it is, I believe, that was kind of ingrained. I'm speaking as an outsider here, okay? as not a non-American, if you will. So that was ingrained, that was taught, that was life, that was everything. Even now, there are some people who still live in that bubble, if you will, just don't really care about themselves. And so don't be hard on yourself. God is gracious enough to give and share all of God's grace. So that's the first thing I would encourage. Please, you live in God's grace. If you don't know any better, you don't do any better, okay? Because you continue to live in what you know, right? The second thing is, and Tamina shared that, and I was about to share that too, but as we have mentioned before, Holy Spirit work in mysterious ways. So the awareness. So part of the learning is to allow ourselves through these learnings to bring awareness. I think part of this book, as I'm reading it, is to educate ourselves and bring this awareness of what was happening. And quite frankly, it is still happening, maybe not into that extent, and not only to that community, because think of it, many years ago, they are kind of the people who own this land, and many of the people who are from Europe that came here, people like us, was not part of this. And so as an outsider, I still consider myself as treated as outsider, as indigenous people. And there are other pockets that are still experiencing that. So the awareness and what do we do about it? I think that's a question. What's the next step, right? The coaching question. What are you thinking of? So I am thinking and wonder if bringing this awareness to us, we educate ourselves and do what we can individually wherever we are. In other words, just shine the light of your learning through your daily experiences with the people amongst you. It doesn't have to only be indigenous people. It can be people of color like me. It can be your fellow white people, if you will, to share and have conversation. I'm just wondering as to bring awareness to them also in our congregation, wherever, as they would say in our coaching ministry, especially as a discipleship coach. How do you empower people to live out their baptism vows, to love all of God's people and creation? And so these can be some stories of how the sinfulness of men affect everyone, or human, affect everyone. And so I'm just wondering, an action step would be, as I'm having conversation, hey, I had this wonderful time this past Wednesday. We were talking about X, Y, and Z. It's like, really, this was happening? Yeah, because people may not know, because again, that's all they taught. And so that would be one way if I can encourage and wonder if we can take care of the whole world problem. And I don't think we should, because somebody else in charge. But we can, in our little spiny space where we are, and as we have said, pray and discern what it is that God is calling me to do at this time and this place, with the understanding and the education we have here. I think I speak a lot there, but again, as I was reading, I didn't read the chapter, I was just reading a few things, and I was just like, well, was this happening? And then I think of politics. What really is the purpose of politics? In America here, we get three parties, right? Democrat, Republicans, Independent. For most parties, two parties. And it's like they're both so much on the other side that they are not, especially in today's world, they are not willing to listen to each other. Because we are talking about the bureaucracy. What is it, the purpose? Is it serving its purpose? And is it the well-being of all? Because that's what I see politics as people who are in leadership should be thinking of the well-being of all. And we can have different ways of doing it. But at the end of the day, what really is this for? So I'll stop there. I don't know, maybe I talk too much. It's time to reflect or soak it in.
That's the blessing of a smaller group, right? We get a little bit more time to, to say our full piece. Yeah.
Are you saying to have a little sermon, if you will?
Not you, Mukesh, because I know you'll take more time.
I try to limit myself. Oh, I always warn myself of George Burns. You guys heard that? Maybe this is out of term. George Burns have a very, very famous quote that says, a good sermon have a good beginning and a good ending, and they stay as close as possible together.
Oh, oh, that's funny.
I would pick up on what you were saying about that awareness. And because what was going through my head was next step is to continue to be a storyteller. I mean, I always look for ways, I will look for some way to bring this conversation in a good way into the conversations that I have over the next few days. I'm reading this book. Here's something that came out. Here's a piece that I didn't know. And just to kind of build that into my thinking in lots of different ways and different places. I go back to the yes, but a lot. Somebody will be going da 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 da, but yes, but did you know the other part of that story? Or yes, did you know this piece? So I think as we think about being problem solvers, it's the yes, we can be in relationship, yes, we can learn, but as Jason wants us to change it all by tomorrow, um, we can't make that happen. But we can do it's back to our whole thing of we're planting seeds. But I just really think of that. I, I've been able to weave some things in to stories and to conversations because I have friends that care, but they're never going to read this book. They're not going to pick it up. They're into some other book, and they may be reading a book that I'm never going to pick up or in a conversation that I'm not a part of. So how can I be that storyteller that is telling the honest story, not just the story we'd like to make up so it makes us feel good.
Awesome. So thank you for sharing that because you just sparked an idea. I know they have a book club at the congregation I serve. I may recommend this as one way to share that story, right? If they are interested, if they are readers, I would just in my own way to share that. Hey, I just came across this book. We are studying it. Think about it and have it as a part of your monthly thing. But also, just a reminder again. Um, I usually have these little things that I go about. You can never ever eat an elephant whole with one bite. Take little chunks. You don't have to eat all of it at one time. I hope you find that helpful because again, we want to take care of the world's problem in one day. It's not gonna happen. So we take steps and take steps that we can able to achieve, right? Smart goals, they would say. Sounding like a little coach now, and maybe I.
This is so great. Yeah, believe it or not, this hour has almost completely disappeared. So final thoughts, connections, wonderings, agitations.
I would just maybe add, I think it's interesting too when we're reading this. I'm sure I'm not the only one that's having those times where you think, oh, I remember that, or oh, I grew up in Iowa, so Tama, Iowa came up in the book, and I remember I had a good friend that was teaching there, and all of a sudden, and we were very clear that it was a settlement, it's not a reservation, and so I was thinking about then I've lived in Alaska and I've worked with, different tribes, but also how we can bring our own stories into that because of the fact that I was alive during that time. I live in that area. Tammy, you've referenced your grandchildren numerous times, and so reading that with that set of lenses. So I also think for us to look for those places where the story just isn't a distant story, but where's that piece that's really I know this part of this story. And now how do I expand on that to see that bigger picture of it? It was not just what happened there, but what else was going on At the time, Tama had the school taken away from him. So,
Mm.
Yes, we are coming on to this couple bits. So I did not grow up in America. I grew up in South America, Guyana. But we had movies, cowboys and Indians, and we saw it as movies. And now that we are reading this book and having a closer or awareness, if you will, I now realize that those movies were actually telling a story without me knowing what the story is. And now to live in a place where the story did happen. So as Sunny was talking about, reservations and communities, I was like, oh wait, cowboys and Indians. That's what we saw. I saw growing up in South America. So again, just the awareness and connecting the dots, if you will.
So let's keep that going. Jason, were you going to say something?
Yeah, thank you for noticing. Something reminded me of two, like, and this is what Mukesh referenced, like my concept of time, right? Which is very white. I still work through that. But thinking about what you shared, Sylvia, about you and I meeting now over 5 years ago and had no idea, right, that this was going to be part of our connection. And so what I heard through Sunny's lens was also trusting like the timing and like the relationships and like noticing what's coming out of the current relationships I have, or what opportunities are right in front of me that my whiteness, is blind to. But if I'm willing to sit for a second, not gorge myself on the elephant and notice what's around me. Yeah, but just a funny, Mukesh, I was thinking like, but it is the white way to like sit at a buffet and make myself sick. So
Yeah, this is great. Well, let's take just do a quick go around and yeah, there's really wonderful sharing and conversation insights today. So what's a powerful learning that you got from today? It could be about the content, about the process, about your experience. And I'm just gonna go ahead and start. I'm so grateful for what you said, Sunny, about a very practical way for me to continue the learning myself and become confident in talking about this with other folks. And that is actually, it has two parts to it. One is just simply, just like, okay, put in my head, like, what is one insight? I don't have to like remember the whole book, right? One insight from this book that in a conversation with somebody, I could say, gosh, I've been reading this book and I've just been like stewing on this piece, for a little bit or whatever, like, really, like it's so simple, but I feel like I often, not often, mostly my way of learning is like, I take it in, I soak it in, and then it just stays in me. And I don't practice the sharing of it. Right. And then your other insight about that was like, what's one connection that I could make with this, with my own life? And there's tons of stuff in here already about the Northwest Indian tribes. Guess what? That's where I am, right? Easy. It's right there. So yeah, just really grateful for that with that wisdom. Thank you for it. Who else? What's something you're
I think my reminder was that slow progress is still progress. So I can, yeah, as long as I'm taking steps.
Grace abounds, buckets and buckets.
Maybe,
And I think,
sorry.
go ahead, Jason.
Maybe that's why I'm walking slow, is because I'm carrying huge buckets of grace. They're weighing me down.
Well, sometimes we need to slow down so we can see.
So for me, I'm continuing to be aware and bringing this awareness of, as Sunny had mentioned, practical ways. I am going to take this book and take it to the book club as one of my action step, and propose that they use this for a month of reading. And also, it was one of the things that I think Sylvie had mentioned. It will be fair. I'm using different words here. It will be fair to say that many white people are ambivalent about all of this instead of Indians. So that's my takeaway too. So
It was really funny when you held up the book, because I went to Kindle this time for it, and I normally buy my paper copy, but I found myself thinking, I used to do a lot of reading in coffee shops, and having a book that was a paper book, I can think of how many times somebody would come up and say, "Well, what are you reading?"
Hmm.
And when I'm sitting there with my Kindle, I can't think of a time anybody came up and said, "Oh, looks like you're reading on your Kindle. What are you reading?" So it's like maybe I have my justification for my buying my print copies after all, but it's just like the simple ways. There's one particular guy at a coffee shop that he always, if I'm there, comes up and says, what are you reading now?" And we end up in a conversation. So yeah, how do we spread that? How can we be an information distributor with those buckets of grace and understanding? Yeah.
It's a great question right there. How can we be an information distributor with those buckets of grace and understanding? Beautiful. All right, friends. Well, thank you for sharing and creating beloved community in this space with the objective of healing together. It takes each and all of us. So Jason's going to put some links about upcoming events in the chat. And do you want to just go ahead and say what these are, Jason? Would that be easier?
Yeah, I can do that real quick. So the first is actually this evening. It's the first module of decolonization and organizing for systems change. And the second module is Saturday, June 21st. That one's also going in the chat. And a reminder, these trainings are alternating every month, hosted by the Coalition to Dismantle the Doctrine of Discovery. So definitely related to our readings. So this month is decolonization and organizing for systems change. Next month will be right relations, and they're just alternating those. And it's 2 modules per month. So two modules per training, and then they're alternating those throughout the year. So hopefully you can catch those at one time or another. And they're varying the dates and times. So hopefully one of those will work for you to catch each of those. Join us back in this space for Creating Beloved Community. Nobody journeys alone. Next week, that's with Jen Kunka and Reverend Carlton Rogers. And then we'll be back for the Reading Circle Gathering with Chapter 7 on the second Wednesday next month, which is July 9th.
All right. And as you leave here today, please remember that you are seen, you are valued, you are loved.
Yeah.
Amen.
Thank you all for being here.
Yep.
Thanks. Good to see you all.
Yep. You too. Bye.